Welcome to Education in Focus. I'm Eliana Kernodle. Tennessee lawmakers are questioning why two counties with virtual schools are reaping thousands in state funding at the expense of the state's other 93. Joining me to dig into this is the Center Square's Kim Jarrett. Kim, there's kind of a quirk of how students are counted and how that affects funding at the heart of this discussion. Could you lay out the situation for us?
Yeah, it's a lot of math. I don't like math except baseball math and crafting math. But I've actually had to do a lot of studying and understanding. So Tennessee enacted this funding formula a few years ago, and it's based on a 70-30%. The state pays 70%, but counties will pay 30% into this formula based on their fiscal capacity. So basically a state like Nashville, Davidson County, they're putting in 18% of this funding formula because of their tax base. They can pay more. Some of those smaller counties, a lot of them are putting in less than 1%. It's also based on how many students you have. So what has happened with these virtual schools, the county that we're not picking on them. We just use them as an example in our story. Johnson County, Tennessee has about 17,982 people. They have 1,837. Hopefully my math is right. I did my own addition. And this is all of this information is taken from the Tennessee Department of Education's website. So they have 1,837 attending school in person, but they have 2,811 attending their virtual schools there. So basically they're getting school funding out of the base formula based out of state funding. They get credit for those students, and it reduces their capacity to pay into what all the other counties are paying in. Basically that 30% that all of Tennessee's 95 counties are paying into. And basically this actually came up at a Tennessee Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations last week. And it was just an interesting thing we just picked up on. Basically what they said is virtual students are considered students in their host county. So these students that are being counted in Johnson County, they might actually live in Davidson County or some of the larger counties, but Johnson County gets credit for those. And Johnson County, because of their high number of students, has their physical capacity to pay into this 30% funding formula decreases. That means that the other 93 counties or 94 have to pick it up. We found in the report there are 56 of these virtual schools throughout the state, but Union County, which is another very small county in Tennessee, Union and Johnson have the majority of these virtual schools and are reaping the benefits of these students who do not live in their county.
That is really interesting. You would think that it would be based just purely on where you reside.
That question was brought up. Senator Heidi Campbell said during the meeting, she goes, we have to know where these students live. Why aren't we, adding them into the funding formula for where they're located? And that's a question that right now has not been answered as to, well, why are these smaller counties getting all the credit?
And there has sort of hand in hand with this, there's been concerns about how these virtual schools are actually doing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So Tennessee Department of Education gives all schools a grade, and they look every year. So you can go to their website and you can find out how well that school is doing. For example, the two virtual schools in our story in Johnson County received a D grade. Some of the other virtual schools, they have lower grades. Now, it was mentioned to me by a source that they are virtual schools that are operated by the school systems, and those tend to get higher grades than these that are operated by private companies. So so not all of the virtual schools are getting these low grades, but it seems to be, looking at what we've seen from the Tennessee Department of Education, a lot of the private companies, their schools get D's, and in some cases, at least D. We've seen a lot of D's. I haven't seen an F yet, but there may be one.
Yeah. And I know this is something that, most states have these virtual schools, but every state is different. Their funding formulas are different.
Yeah, right. It's all the funding I've covered a lot of states for the Center Square in my time here, and every school has a different funding formula. But I've been noticing, particularly in Georgia, I cover Georgia and Tennessee, they're having a lot of these virtual schools. I'm seeing people on Facebook that I know saying, hey, my child is going to a virtual school. Let me clarify this to you, because this question has been raised a few times. This is not home, like when a school, like during the pandemic, everybody was virtually schooled. This is totally different. These are virtual schools that parents can use. Say, I don't want to send my child to school, but I don't want to do the homeschooling. I don't want to supervise it. So they sign up for these virtual schools. So it has nothing to do with the pandemic, just to be clear, because that question was raised by a reader. So yeah, we don't know if this other funding formulas if other schools with their funding formulas across the country are having the same issues with virtual schools skewing the funding formula. I think one of the things that is going to be looked at is, why don't we just list these students as where they live, and then they will be, they'll be given credit. Say if they go to virtual school in Johnson County, but they live in Davidson would get the funding for that student. There is going to be in Tennessee, the chairman of the committee agreed, there is going to be a report. I'm working on some follow-ups to this. So we haven't heard the last of this issue. That committee will do a report. They're going to delve deeper into this.
Yeah, and I know these schools have been around for a while. I personally went to an online school in high school, so I'm a little bit more familiar with it, and that was prior to the pandemic. So they've definitely picked up a lot of speed, and it's become a lot more of a question that I've been seeing a lot about, especially post-pandemic. It's been much more common, but they were around before then. But I think as they've grown, a lot of these concerns about how you navigate funding is becoming a bigger and bigger question. Well, thank you for your insights on this story. Viewers can follow this story and more at thecentersquare.com.